Happy Wine Wednesday, everyone. Hope you're doing. Week has been fantastic. Hope your tanks are wonderful. I can't think of any other good things to say, so let's just jump right in, shall we? I am sipping on Chardonnay. It's been my go-to every Wine Wednesday. So let me know in the comments what you're sipping on. I meant. Only updates I have before we get with the live guest is number one, wearing one of my shirts, of course. Dragons are real. Trying to wear one every week, trying to remember. And for those of you that tune in every week and know what's going on with the membership and the website and the else, I did figure out, and you will have the option once the website is live. Man, I'm hoping next week. You will be able to put your own design on a t-shirt. There will be requirements. It has to be a certain, quality of an image and such, but you will be able to edit one or two of the shirts to your liking. Put your name on it, put your Seahorse on it, whatever. So big things coming. Dan's still out in the woodworks, very, very busy, still works source part. It will come, guys. I'm sorry. It's just we're at the mercy of life. You know how it is. Hey, Zen Ginger, good to see you. Last thing is, I know that we played around with the membership memes, emojis, whatever, emojicons, whatever the heck they're called on the channel. And you guys pointed out the fact that I was making them with words, so they were too small to see and such. So if you know a designer or anything like that, or if you guys have any ideas, please get with me because we want to make some cool things to be able to use. All right, and my guest just left. He must be grabbing something. Maybe he's grabbing his wine. Let's see. There we go. Okay, so our guest. No, you're fine. Wait, what? You're echoing now. Uh-oh. I think I heard your cat.
Sorry, my equipment.
That's all right. And you're kind of freezing up. If it causes a bunch of problems, do you have an iPhone or an Android, Scott?
I had to get.
Okay, well now we've got you like you're coming in and out. But let's continue to try. If I shut up and let you talk, maybe that'll help. Because Scott is here with Poseidon. I think I'm pronouncing it right. Poseidon Kitchen Aquaculture, and he is here. He was joined us last week, and he was making some comments in the comment section because I was having trouble with bacteria in my tank. But before we get to my tank, I want to find out more about Scott. So, Scott, tell us, what is Poseidon's Kitchen Aquaculture? Why did it start? What made you do it? And what do you do? Oh, darn it. Can you hear me? See, this is why we should have session before.
Kind of a little bit choppy.
So what I'm thinking is maybe, okay. Try jumping out and coming back.
This is the.
In. I'm so sorry, Scott. We can't hear anything you're saying. Try leaving the stream and coming back in. And if that doesn't work, maybe try jumping in on your phone. And while he does that, because this is going to be a fun conversation, guys. Oh, man. Such a bummer. We're going to try to figure it out. Zen for putting his link up. And I bet you he can't see my message. Let me try and here, see if that Scott. Leaving the stream and jumping back in. Let's see, he's done. Okay, I think he's just left and back in. If that doesn't work, then we will try on the phone. Let's see. Can we hear you, Scott? Can you hear us? All right, so here's what we're going to do. Sorry. Try jumping in on phone. Can you hear me, Scott?
I can hear you guys.
And that's a bummer because we. Okay, it's a little delayed. All right, tell me about Poseidon's Kitchen Aquaculture, what you do, how it started.
Well, my son is out of a job during COVID, and I had to keep my animals alive and fed, and I was already culturing copepods and phytoplankton and brine shrimp. I could I had a good thing going, and it inspired me to.
So, oh gosh, I am so sorry, everybody, and I'm sorry, Scott. If we had did a practice run of this, we could have figured out. I should tell guests that when you jump into live stream, if your computer isn't, like if it doesn't have the RAM and stuff, sometimes it will freeze out like this, or depending on when you're located, it might not even be the computer, it could be location. But I think I would say definitely check out the website, because not only does he have a lot of cool live feeds going on, but as he's going to do today, if we can get this to work, he's going to help us learn about how the whole ecosystem works together, right? And how maybe I can fix my tank, right, guys? But also, I mean, I just think it's cool that so many people started their businesses during COVID and they're doing wonderful things. What we really need is for you to start doing mycets, but we'll stick with copepods for now. So if we turn our cameras off, David, I mean, I'm more than happy to do that. Let's see. Let me ask a question and see if that helps. So if I turn us off completely, maybe let me put Cheryl out. And I can definitely turn my camera off. So Scott, do you want, I know this is kind of a rather vague question, but can you tell us about the how the bacteria and the copepods and everything work to make a better tank?
Yeah, they all play a role. The biggest thing is you can't get things. No one can see there's important things going on in your aquarium that you can see. The bacteria, the phytoplankton, the copepods, and just going up the ladder with each critter that gets bigger and bigger, they all play a role in processing food and processing waste and continuing that cycle. The nitrogen cycle itself is already recycling nutrients just itself. Same goes for the carb cycle, and then the food doing the same thing. So everything plays a role. And a lot of times our brand new tanks are lacking a lot of these foundations in order to recreate the ecosystem that all these animals came from. It took me a very long time to figure out how to do this, but it worked for me in ways I can't explain, and it's changed the way I've ever set up a system. I try to teach
Absolutely.
anybody. I try to teach anybody.
Sorry. There is, so basically what we're going to deal with. Sorry, Scott. So what we're going to deal with on the stream is there's a little delay. When I ask a question, you don't hear it for like 5 seconds. And then when I start talking, you don't hear it for 5 seconds. So I'll try to just shut up and let you talk more. But the two things that I'd be interested in, I want to ask about my personal tank, but I will let you continue, and definitely let us know what are in the tanks behind you, because I'm curious about looking at those right now. But go ahead.
This here is my personal 40 breeder. It's the rock inside of it is over 2 or 3 years old, minus some of the dry rock that I had to add. It's I've kind of had a little bit of everything in there. I haven't figured out a theme or what to do with it yet. I'm kind of itching towards the Seahorse route. I kind of want something bigger if I want to do this. Do more than just one. That's kind of what I'm here. It just got done going to a really nasty hair algae. And I got orchids in there that in butt and taking care of business. The one that you see over here is where I hold my macros that are getting ready to get away into another system. Quarantine macro tank right now because I just recently got macros. So far, so good on all of them. Getting out of it. But they still got a couple more weeks to go. And I get those cleaned off and put them into my pond. And like you mentioned, the mysis shrimp and the copepods are something I'm trying to get back going again.
Yay! If you start selling amphipods and mysis, we are going to be so happy with you because we need a new distributor of those items. And are you planning to sell macros too, or is it just for you? Cool, because we will buy them. We
Absolutely.
love them. And
yeah.
So are you a huge proponent of rock in a tank as part of this ecosystem? And let me explain why. Because a lot of see on this channel over and over again about having a tank be too sterile or having a tank be, natural or whatnot. And there's benefits and pros and cons to each way. But I'm just curious what your thoughts are about if you need rock and sand in a tank, and if that is what is helping the ecosystem, or is it more of the critters?
It plays a huge role. It's a natural in the ocean, and it has its benefits. It also has downfalls. Out of the ocean, it's chemistry and biological diversity in our tanks sometimes. So the enemy, it kills tanks. It can also hold. It can, too much rock. I've seen this many times when we have the 2 pound per gallon roll. People put together 250 and 300 gallon tanks, and they're putting hundreds of rock in there, and it looks like a big rock quarry. And unfortunately, your rock quarry in a closed system over time is building up hydrogen sulfide gases inside your rock that is going to send your tank packing if you're not careful, or you have a power outage one day and your tanks. So rock has its disadvantages when it comes to our closed systems. It definitely outweighs anything else. You can get biological surfaces. There are ways to do it. You just have to understand what can grow on it and what like that surface. Good example, nitrifiers. They like to be in a really heavy oxygenated environment. So if there's a lot of water flow and a lot of oxygen, you bet your money that you have nitrogen living on that surface, whether you can see it or not. I mean, eventually you'll start to see slime and sludge, and that eventually waste, and they, the animals live as their food itself. So definitely, I would never, definitely put, like, my system over here, I maybe have 25 rock, and it's a 40-gallon tank. But I also have a good size sand bed. I've got other biological filtration over here. So there's other surfaces that I've created that I don't need to necessarily have just a bunch of pound of rock in there that's just doing me no good.
And can you tell us a little bit more, because I'm not scientific, so you're teaching me right now. And in the seahorse community, we often use like K1 and the Robert King char chambers to be that alternate media, like you talked about. In fact,
Exactly.
Holly, when we bring Holly back on, you're going to see her tank in the background, and she has no rock. She has many filtration methods in the
Yeah.
sump, but in the tank, it's just all artificial, and it works for her. Like you said, it just depends on what you're doing. But back to my question, you talked about rock, tell me a problem, and the what did you say, nitrous sulfide or something? I thought that was something that
Hydrogen,
only happened in, sorry, go ahead.
hydrogen sulfide.
I thought that was something that happened when, like in deep sand, disrupted it, but it happens in rock too?
Hydrogen sulfide up in environments where there's 0 to no oxygen. And in order for this process to happen, for the hydrogen and sulfide to obviously chemically bond, you need some sort of a disturbance of an episode, because your saltwater tank has tons of sulfur. And so it's a matter of that waste being able to, like if if you pile a bunch of rock together and eventually you just set that tank up and everything runs great, 3 years later, you have a power outage, you never touch that area where that rock was. It's the same concept as if you have a deep sand bed and you never touch it or you disturb it, depending on the layers and the thickness of it, which is why I recommend nobody ever to worry about creating those kind of zones in your aquarium. We are not we don't have the volume, the density, or the bacterial load to handle those kind of gases. I'm sure the ocean has something going on where it can handle hydrogen sulfide, because there's got to be a ton of it in there. And so there's got to be a critter in there that we don't have that the ocean can do. So we, as hobbyists and aquarium keepers, we do the maintenance, we remove, we give fresh water, we clean certain things certain ways in order to keep that stuff happy.
Right. And so if someone did have an aquascape that did have a lot of rock, like for instance, in my tank, I don't have rock upon rock that's creating no zone areas like you described, but I do have rock that make caves that saying, do you recommend that someone rearrange the rock every year or something, or what is the answer to that?
Honestly, moving rocks around is not a bad thing at all.
Right.
A lot of times, especially depending on the stage in which your tank is going through, when you're cleaning, if you're having to clean a lot or you're having to deal with a lot of nuisance algae, that's a great time to pick at the rock, clean it, scrub it, and then put it in a different spot. I mean, it depends. Some people glue the rocks and they already have their their aquascapes already kind of set in stone. You can't do nothing to it. It's just mainly the important thing to think is that there just needs to be flow. There needs to be oxygen. So as long as your tank is flowing, things are moving around, you're not going to create these noxious gases and build up in your system. So it's it's those systems that have just built up a ton of waste. They're super, super old, and you haven't touched certain areas, and then it's that sudden loss of power or the sudden cutoff of oxygen. Because a lot of people don't realize is it's not so much the hydrogen sulfide in your system that could kill your fish. It's the bacteria soaking up all the oxygen out of the water, because bacteria are not going to wait around for food if there's a available food source that they can grab out of the water. And they go, oh, there's no oxygen? All right, well, there's carbon dioxide. All right, I'll take some of that. Oh, there's nitrogen. Oh, I'll take some of that. There's salt. They'll take all kinds of stuff. And in your situation, to get to your tiny tank, as soon as I hopped on the stream, I knew right away what was going on. And it happens all the time sometimes when you clean too much stuff and, you know, you give favor to a bacterial in your system that just had a field day. And it's such an easy thing to correct because that bacteria is photosynthetic. And so you turn the lights off and they go bye-bye.
Okay, hang on. Let me see if I can pull it up to show you guys because, or you could just go watch last week, I guess. But, and I'll tell you guys, well, geez, maybe I don't have it right with me. I guess not. Nope, I can't grab it, but go watch last week if you want to know. Basically, I was showing my seahorse flicking, and which is a big deal to us because that means ciliate infection typically. But I also showed how cloudy the water was. And I will give you an update. I haven't done the freshwater dips, mainly because I've been so busy, but also because I have not seen that seahorse flick again. So what are your thoughts on that? Do you think it was just because I stirred up so much stuff by cleaning too much, bacteria bloom, and maybe whatever's in the water was irritating him? Yeah? Okay.
It was the lack of oxygen. I mean, he was irritated from the tank being limited in oxygen. And so him moving and, you know, flicking his tail it could have been a connection with you and like, hey man, like something's not right. Like get me out of here, you know, bring me to the surface. You know, that's why I mentioned when I saw the seahorse go to the surface, I know seahorses do that all the time, but they typically do that when they're wanting a little bit extra air. And it's probably just saying, hey, look, it's a little hard to breathe in here right now.
Holly just said in the comments, I'm going to bring them in a little bit. I just wanted to get with Scott one-on-one first. But she said he just wanted to breathe better. And I'll tell you, Scott, I want to know your fix for my tank because, again, for anybody who's new, basically I started off just trying to prove that you could keep seahorses in a smaller system because most of us keep them in big systems with sumps, and I can't do that. So the goal of this tank was just to keep a pair of seahorses in a 40-gallon all-in-one with no sump, showing you that it can be done. I've done that for quite a while, but then I got baby crazy and I want fry again. So I added, now I've got 5 seahorses in there, which is a big no-no. Please don't do this unless you're experienced. And now I'm dealing with issues and I've got to fix them before I move them to other tanks and pair them up and everything else. So I'm showing what not to do right now. But the 2 questions, Scott, are number 1, this cloudy tank seems to be almost a constant. Like every time I do a water change, it gets cloudy again. I know I'm cleaning too much, but I want to hear your answer for it. And then it starts to web off. And then I do a water change, which you would think would make it cleaner and, you know, less cloudy, and it gets cloudy again. And what was the other question? The other question was, well, answer that one while I try to remember my other question. Sorry.
The tank has no sand, correct?
No sand, right? Just rock. It's got K1, it's got a UV, it's got a skimmer, but they're all in one in the back, so not overrated the way we like. And then it has the Robert King chamber. And the Robert King char chamber did make a huge difference, but now that it's, you know, the system has gotten used to it, I'm guessing like the bacteria has figured out a way to even overcome that or something. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
It's lacking surfaces. It's
Okay.
you don't have sand. We're lacking surfaces for the right type of bacteria to dominate right now because you don't have the surface for the nitrifiers and those autotrophs to grow. We're growing heterotrophs every time we do this massive water change.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew that. Sorry.
Yeah, and the sad thing is it doesn't help that we have the added seahorses in there. So we have the added organics, the added life taking stuff out, oxygen, producing more carbon dioxide. So there's some addedness to it, and just not having the surfaces in the tank to just handle the bioload. And cars, you know, it could be, you know, I can't remember if he told me if you cleaned anything like biologically. Can't remember if he said
What I
that.
do every week, what I do every week is I remove and change out the sock, which Ray said I need to be doing that a lot more. I only do it once a week, which is probably terrible.
Okay.
I clean the skimmer completely because the skimmer's always nasty.
Okay.
The floss on top of when you have a UV sterilizer, guys, remember this is an all-in-one. So it's not some big chamber. It's literally a light in a thing that I stick in the back of the tank. So it has a floss over it. So I do remove and replace that floss every week. I usually don't touch the char chamber unless the sponge filter looks nasty. Then I'll swish it in tank water. And other than that, massive cleaning where I'm cleaning the sides of the tank. I'm cleaning the bottom of the tank because if there's algae on the rocks, I'm picking it off.
Oh, yeah. See, okay, so yeah, you're scrubbing surfaces where the only surface that the bacteria had to live on, and you're scrubbing it off and putting it in the water. And so they're
Right.
getting lifted up into the water, and because the water now is all filled with organics and probably limited in oxygen, they decided, hey, guess what? We were nitrifying, but there's all this available food now, and there's no oxygen. I can't do my chemical process. I can't break down ammonia into nitrite. I can't break down nitrite into nitrates. I'm going to decide, okay, I'm going to start using stuff in here, and I'm going to have a field day. And there's your bloom every single time.
Well, see, and as seahorse keepers, we absolutely recommend wiping the sides. I get what you're saying, but I think that in my situation, it's honestly just boils down to too many seahorses. So, like in addition to everything you just said, I've overstocked it, so the oxygen's already limited. So when I do a water change, if I don't do a massive enough one, or if I'm scrubbing everything, then it's disrupting everything I've got going on in the ecosystem, like you said. With seahorse tanks, we kind of do things a little different. We try to keep them more sterile because the seahorses produce so much organics and there's so much crap in the tank because they eat more. But I think there has to be a happy medium, especially if you're going to do a smaller tank. And that's why, Scott's helping me, Cheryl and Ray help me, and we'll figure it out. You don't have this problem when you set up a small seahorse tank. But the other thing I would say, Scott, is that my seahorses and now this is interesting because I was bragging a few weeks ago because the seahorses love the Robert King char chamber so much, right? They fight to sleep hitched to the airline where the air, the oxygen, the bubbles are right on top of them. And all of my seahorses sleep near the surface every time. So is this showing me that I have an oxygen problem, bottom line?
No, your seahorses are telling you exactly what you need to know, and they're hanging around that char chamber for a good reason. And to go back to what you're saying, how you want to keep things sterile with a seahorse tank, I would agree. But since you're cleaning the surfaces where your bacterial load needs to live on, and now your char chamber is now in the mix, I honestly, personally, you could probably, that char chamber is a pretty amazing tool to see hundreds of clownfish in a small tank, all living, all thriving without any ammonia issues, would tell me that your 5 seahorses in there probably don't need that much maintenance, or maybe as much maintenance as you have been doing before. That char chamber is probably going to give you that leeway to actually limit your maintenance. But we won't know that until you test your nitrates and phosphates and kind of know, what are the changes happening now that I added this new biological filter. Anytime you add a new biological filter, your tank's going to go through some sort of a dip and change. And so maybe you adding this filter, you were just going about your normal maintenance, not knowing the adjustments that probably need to be made because now we have something that's keeping things safe.
Right. But so in the meantime, as I'm testing, and I will test nitrate and phosphate, guys, just for you. I don't usually test those, to be honest, so I will. And because it's a smaller tank, because I now have the char chamber to compensate for some of the things that I didn't have before, should I maybe, well, and here's my next question. The reason that as seahorse keepers, we always say scrub the glass because we try to keep it sterile. But in my case, I have to because I've got algae going on. And again, in my case, guys, this is an extreme case where I've overstocked the tank, is the bottom line. We all know that. But how can I, like, if the advice is don't try not scrubbing the sides, see what happens, because I do know what you're saying is the truth. In my reef tank, when there's a problem like that, I don't usually go crazy cleaning because it usually works itself out and it fixes itself instead of me messing it up. But in a seahorse tank, you can't really do that. And like with I don't want green glass. So what do I do?
You're missing a lot of things. That's why we're missing copepods, we're missing phytoplankton, we're missing sand, we're missing so many things that would prevent or help or provide a constant food source for seahorses. I kept a seahorse. It's actually one of the animals that got me into saltwater for the very first time.
Oh, cool.
It was like I said, I'm trying to maybe build another one, but getting that thing to eat food was I had to buy it live food. I couldn't get it to eat anything that I fed it. I was driving to a place that had my guy was culturing it, and I was buying it from him, and I was good for a year until it got sick. It might have been from my live food feedings, I'm not sure, but my tank literally had he had brine shrimp daily. There was copepods always in the tank, phytoplankton fed often, and I didn't have to worry about finally going and get mysis shrimp all the time. It only worked for a year. Whether I did something wrong, maybe I should have kept the mysis shrimp going. Maybe that was the lacking part, that maybe he failed. And maybe I failed because I didn't train the seahorse to eat food that I would feed it. I didn't have a lot of time at that point in time. I was getting home late, and so the only time I had the time with a seahorse was at late at night. I'd come home and see it and do what I need to do.
Well, I'll tell you this. First of all, Kevin, I see your question. Zen Ginger, we're going to get to your questions, I promise, in just a second. But I can tell you that Cheryl and Holly are probably chomping at the bit to get in here right now. I'm going to bring them in a minute.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely, Brian. Well, I don't want to yet because, as someone said, you seem to not. David said, when I turn them off, you seem to come in clearer. So I want you to come in clear till I bring them in. But I can tell you, as a seahorse keeper for a long time, that I've learned that brine shrimp, even enriched, is not enough to sustain a seahorse long term. Copepods actually are, and Cheryl's experimenting with copepods, but like for instance, at least up until now, won't eat them. They're too small. They don't go after them. Amphipods, they will. Amphipods are great for seahorses, but having that live feed, I'm guessing you had a wild caught seahorse, is my first guess. And I would say that's why, as keepers today, we're so much luckier. What? You thought it was wild caught? Yeah. Because when you get captive, when you get captive bred seahorses, they're trained already. You don't have to train them. It's like one of the big things that's so great about keeping seahorses today is you can automatically just start feeding them and they'll eat. And it's amazing. Still want to add live feeds because the seahorse probably isn't getting everything it needs from a frozen food. So that's why I wish my seahorses would eat copepods. We need a new dealer in mysids and in amphipods. But back to Kevin's question. I'm sorry here, but he said I can't say the word right. Heterotrophic bacteria multiply very easily. So he asked this question when we were back talking about how, so basically you were saying something like, because my nitrifying bacteria, when I do things wrong, it turns into heterotrophic. Did I get that wrong?
Whenever your tank is limited in oxygen. So
okay,
when you, let's say you clean all those surfaces and you're removing all that bacteria that's growing on that surface, you've in a sense killed it in a way, but you've given it of where it wanted to be. It was on that surface, it had some flow and oxygen, it was doing nitrification, it was doing its thing. You go there and scrape it off, now it's in the water, and now the water, because of all the organics, because we're doing a water change and things, and we're scrubbing things, the organics drop oxygen. And so oxygen drops, and now carbon dioxide is in our system, nitrogen is in our system, more and heavier in solution. So that breathes and get in 20 minutes, these guys will start multiplying by the thousands and by the millions.
Gotcha.
And that's why people have those tank scares, those I lost power, then my power comes back on like 3 or 4 hours later, and the next thing you know, their whole tank is dead because they literally just pumped a bunch of noxious gas from the bacteria just sitting there going, all right, there's no oxygen, time to switch gears.
Makes sense. No, that does make sense. That's scary as hell. And what can you do about that though? I know you already answered my question for me, but I mean, like
for you,
for a tank no, for anyone. Like how like a battery powered airline or what?
No, just have sand, and then a lot of times if you know a storm is about to happen, go clean that canister. Make sure you go clean that hang-on back filter, or go make sure something is, the biological aspect of your tank or something is just clean. Or another thing would be is when the power decides to come back on, maybe don't go on right away. Give it or just make sure that the whatever pump water that's been sitting for hours, don't pump that back into your tank. That's just the main thing, is that if you have sitting water for hours, do not move that back into your tank.
Please remind me after questions, because I don't want to make people wait anymore. I have to ask you about for a water change. Just say, Kelly, what did you want to ask me about new water for a water change? But no, everything you just said made sense. And because we just don't like sand in the seahorse world, many of us. But I think this is also kind of a shout out to sumps, because when you have a sump, you've got the water surface down there being agitated. Still won't help in a water change or in a power outage, but like many people keep their biological media in the sump, like Holly. She'll tell us about it when she comes in. But I think that's a good alternative. I'm just trying to prove that we can do this for people that want a smaller tank but want seahorses. But I need to start taking it seriously and realizing I don't have and I need to worry about oxygen for sure. And let's see. Zen Ginger asked, since most folks like a bare bottom, but you need more surface, and since artificial decorations are frequently used with surfaces or with seahorses anyways, would something like a koosh balls from the 90s work as a substrate to help provide surface area in the tank for beneficial bacteria? Do you even know what they are?
Bioballs.
Okay.
Balls, plastic bioballs. I mean, anything that, literally any kind of surface that water can flow through it. So if it's, a lot of the what you call bricks, the brick media that they, that stuff isn't so porous. So there's only going to be a certain amount of layer that your nitrifiers are going to actually go on. So a ball is nothing but water is flowing through the cooler device. So it's got water flow through it or above it, or just where there's oxygen you can get to it, is a great surface, and you can create that many ways. You don't have to have sand. I prefer sand because it's my preference. I like to look at something natural from the sea. I don't like to look at, because I look at so many work tanks, I don't want to make it feel like a work tank.
Sure.
So, but I totally agree with the seahorse, with seahorses and having bare bottoms. It's very common. In fact, many of my customers, I try to show them and teach them, let's install this food chain in your bare bottom tank. There's a way to do it, since you decided not to go the substrate route. And we mentioned, bioballs. That's a surface for the bacteria, and that's also a surface for microfauna, zooplankton, all those little bugs and critters. They'll start climbing on, crawling that thing when that starts to clog up. Yeah.
Well, actually,
anything on the surface.
Because I know what you're getting ready to answer, and I will ask the question since that you're answering it. But I would say, and Holly will jump in a minute, that she actually just recently experienced a situation where, because she had pile on pile of bioballs and the water wasn't flowing, or oxygen problems, everything you're talking about, she had to clean them. So we'll get her in here and discuss that. What is your answer? Let's go back to my tank, and then I'll go back to the questions. But actually, before I go back to my question, Kevin said reduce light cycle time. Would that help?
Yeah, the light plays a big role. Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Your light is. Yep. Your light's definitely going to, they'll get their energy from photosynthesis. So they'll use photosynthesis to create carbon energies, and then some of the other bacteria in there are going to reuse that energy and do what they need to do. So reducing that light and turning off that light immediately diminishes that or kills that process, because once they got no light, they go back to doing what they need to do, or they should, if you don't remove them from the surface like you're doing, your nitrifiers should be right there where you left them. They should be right back going where they need to go.
Well, and that's my big frustration is I've got the char chamber, I've got the K1 media, I've got the rock. So I'm pissed off that anything's trying to grow on the glass. So in that moment, right? Stay off my glass.
Oh man, you need.
I mean, really, it is that I have too many seahorses in there. But you were going to tell us. We do have a few more questions, but you were going to tell us about. Also in my tank, I do have some sort of critters, little tiny bugs on the glass. Don't know what they are. I'm disrupting them every time I do a water change. It's because there's film algae on the glass. But can you tell us a little bit more about the cycle you're talking about in any kind of tank, mine or otherwise? If you add the phyto and the copepods, then that makes a whole ecosystem. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, like I said, let's take for example, you disturbing your tank, and we released all those organics. Let's say we actually have, more surface. Let's say we have the surfaces that we needed, or the bacterial load that we needed. Let's say we had the phytoplankton maybe in the system. Let's say we had a dense, population of copepods. Maybe during that situation, when we do all that disturbance, maybe when we go to put fresh water in, we don't experience the same bloom and dominance of the bacteria that you've been getting every single time. And so it's important to have everything still kind of in order, because everything is feeding everybody. And that's the important thing, is that anything that can fit in its mouth is potential food. So bacteria being the smallest, and then you got phytoplankton getting bigger, and then you got your, protozoas, your protists, and then you got your copepods, and then amphipods, and then your shrimp, and so on and so on. All these different critters all eat different animals at different sizes. And so when you have this balance of eating and waste, eating and waste, eating and waste, and it all gets circulated correctly with your filtration, your method of cleaning the tank and everything, that's where you begin to find a balance in your ecosystem to where you could probably go away for a week, not feed your tank, and it will be fine. You could probably go away for maybe even a month, and it would be fine.
Not if you have seahorses. But I get your point. I get your point.
I granted, you're right. With seahorses, it's probably different. But let's say reef tank, you know, full-fledged, you know, people with reef tanks. As long as you got all those little bells and whistles and monitors hooked up, food to me, you know, if you got it in the tank and you've done and created an ecosystem, they're going to find it. They'll be fine for, you know, the time that you need to go away. If need be, and you just need to monitor.
Absolutely. So it has always, we've had other guests on that explain this to me, but it has always baffled my mind that like adding phytoplankton and adding to a tank would make it cleaner and less organics. I get it in theory. I get what you're saying, but to me, you're dumping more in. So just like you said, the eating process, because they all eat each other and therefore it's cleaner. Like it just, I don't know. I just can't get past. You're what?
You have to think of it not as food that becomes waste. It's food that becomes food. So eventually it becomes food because of the animals and the army of animals that I have from the smallest closed box. I know that when I put phytoplankton in, I'm feeding the bacterial diversity. I'm also going to be feeding my copepod diversity, my amphipods, my shrimp. Your seahorses are drinking water. They have water going through and out their bodies.
Right.
I'm pretty sure phytoplankton being in the water, they're going to get that nutrients and that nutrition from the phytoplankton, not to mention the copepods will be more denser in the water. The microfauna, all the different little bugs that are in the water, the seahorse will be able to walk around and just drink it up, you know, drink copepods, eat them, whatever, because they're super small.
Well, I don't think they're drinking, but they definitely do take in water. But a question, personal question, just for me. So if I'm in a situation where, because of my water changing the way I do it, cleaning too many surfaces and everything, and creating so much heterotrophic, if I'm saying it right, bacteria, wouldn't phytoplankton feed that and make it multiply crazy? Or like, I guess what I'm trying to make hit home for anybody who watches is, if you're going to go with this ecosystem, you need to make sure you have every aspect of it. Because if you just add phyto and you've got a class and you don't have the copepods and you don't have the next stage, then you're just creating more of a mess, right? Or am I way off here? Would
you're kind of, because if actually phytoplankton might have helped you, but it depends, because you're not having oxygen in there. It's not helping anything.
Gotcha.
So, you know, that the drop in oxygen is not helping. But if let's say we got everything back up and rolling, and then you saw the cloudy tank, and then go, oh, okay, let me go grab some phytoplankton and throw some in there. You throw live phytoplankton in there with organics and nutrients and light, well, it's going to grow. So it's going to grow. It's also going to consume and take some of that organics out of the water. So it actually is going to help you and give, you know, pass their cell, whatever they get out of the water, build up in their cell, they'll pass that on to the next animal. That might have helped you, but I wouldn't say like just pour phytoplankton in there and not get the water back, or before you get the water mat moving and stuff like that, because then, you know, we don't want that.
And I will say, in this tank, I do not have, and this is something I preach about, is, you know, when we talk about how much turnover for a seahorse tank, we constantly say you need to not just have from the return or from the, you know, from the all-in-one back or whatever, and pumps, you need to have flow throughout the tank. And I've done a poor job of that in this all-in-one. So what you're saying makes perfect sense. And Zenjin, I'm gonna bring Holly in because I'm sure they have plenty of questions and thoughts. But Zen Ginger said, is there a minimum amount of sand you really need suggest to get the substrate benefits?
You get an inch. You know, an inch layer or two is plenty. Anything deeper than 5 to 6 inches, you're asking for trouble. That's where you're building a zone that's going to have 0 to potentially no oxygen. So 1 to 2 inches is perfect. It's enough for you to grow some surface bacteria. It's enough for your surface, or for the critters that like to live in there, the copepods, the amphipods, whenever they're, you know, around. Of course, they're more hiding, but nighttime, these critters come out at nighttime and scour the sand. Since they're translucent, they're camouflage. They're pretty hidden to most animals at nighttime, minus a few. But they scour and go and find whatever they need throughout the tank. And so having just enough surface for them to live on is perfect. You don't need to have anything crazy or a minimum amount. Plus, let's face it, with us having to do whatever kind of wave pumps you got to set here and there, you don't want sand blowing around.
Right.
That's always annoying. So.
Absolutely. And so my final question before I bring the others in is, how in the heck did my tank get these little critters? I mean, I'm serious that, oh no, I have one more question, but my tank all of a sudden had these little critters on the glass because there was algae on the glass, but I didn't add anything. Were they just always there and they multiplied? Is that how it works?
Could have came from your seahorse. They could be hitchhiked on their skin. Anything wet that you add from anything, from any source of anything, all this stuff is microscopic, so you can't. I mean, especially what I deal with. Anything I touch that's wet, it has to be designated to that animal and that animal only. All 3 of my copepods really have their own locker room of equipment. They have their own stuff, own gear, everything. Anything that gets wet, I can then assume that is contaminated. It's got copepods, it's got rotifers, it's got something that I touched, whatever I touched. So they will come hitchhike on so many things. In fact, I remember hearing before copepods ever became a thing, they were considered pests. Most copepods are pests. You know, lucky for us, we got ones that are good guys that actually benefit us and provide food sources, breeding projects, and the ecosystem biological balance that we're all trying to create.
Absolutely. And no, I love that you said that, because that's one thing we talk about all the time is cross-contamination. Anything wet, even nets to strain food. I mean, you just have to have separate equipment for separate tanks. And okay, my final question, I know there's a lot of questions I haven't covered, but I'll bring Holly and Sherilyn and they'll ask them. But I have a question about bacteria. Okay, here's the question. Instead of rambling, I'll just ask it. So I've always wondered, because when I have my bucket, I add either distilled or RODI water that I make sure the TDS is less than 3 or whatever. It's distilled water, right? I add the salt, I put in the pump. My question is, and maybe your answer will be oxygen, we'll see. But if you set a glass of water on a counter, you know that if you leave that glass of water on the counter for 3 days, you don't want to drink it because there's bacteria in it. It grew, right? Because it was just sitting there. So as we all make water for our tanks, how is that not happening in our bucket for water? And the reason I ask is because I have made sure that's so spotless, perfect, no scratches where bacteria could grow, perfect. And then I'll make salt water, and if I don't use it that day, the next day it's got crap in it, and I cover it and everything. So I went a long way around, but doesn't bacteria grow in our water that we're making for the tank? Did that make sense or no?
Yes, always. Yes, it does.
So
we don't have the micron filtration. Yep, it's in there. It's every time only filters up to a certain size. I don't think it's what 10. I think it's the micron filters. Maybe it's 1. I can't remember, but maybe it's 10 or 1. It's really small, and let's face it, there's something smaller, and it can get through it, and it's in your water. And then you add salt, and the salt is organics. That's the thing, is the salt has bacteria living in the salt, living on the surfaces
Right.
of the salt. So you're adding bacteria just from adding salt. So there's already organics in there. So yeah, you are, and so that's why we say mix the salt water up, and then you want to use it as quick as possible. You don't want to.
So don't let it sit for days. Got it. I've been trying to.
You're playing devil's advocate, and you're playing a guessing game on whatever it is that you could potentially grow in that barrel of water you're mixing. Can it be harmful? Maybe not. Could it be harmful? It could be, and you never know.
Well, I've been trying to prove this point forever, that I don't think it's a good idea to let water that you've mixed sit for a long period of time. Some people have huge things that, sit for a month, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I would never, because, something is growing in there. It has to be. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, me personally, I let salt for me is, you mix it in hours, we got to use it. If I have salt water that I contain and keep it keep it for periods of time, when I go to reuse that salt water, it goes through a sterilization process. And so I either use bleach or I use heat in order to basically bring that water back down to where it needs to be. And then I can add a pump back to it to rejuvenate it with oxygen and get it going again and bring it back to life. Will it dissipate some ions and some stuff? Yeah, but depending on what you're doing in your application, you probably aren't looking to do water changes to get your replenishness that way.
Sure. Okay, I'm bringing them in, and then we'll kind of, because I ramble, you guys, and I jump all over. We'll go back over everything. Yep. But my last question as I bring them in, and I'll let you talk as I bring them in, Scott, is how do you feel about bottle bacteria? Like whether it be a new tank, or in my case, when I had larger tanks, I constantly add Dr. Tim's One and Only. Not constantly, but like maybe once a month. So is that good, bad, or ugly? Go ahead and speak.
No, perfect. Yeah. Bacteria, people don't realize bacteria is food. All bacteria is food. You put bacteria in your tank. The problem is knowing which type of bacteria in your tank at the time in which you need to put it in there. Great example. There's a product like the products that say or waste away. You're not going to want to use that to your tank. The bottle is going to have more enterophic bacteria, and as opposed to the One and Only, that's going to have a denser ratio of your nitrifiers, as opposed to heterotrophic bacteria. Think of bacteria as just like.
Oh no. Let me get them off. Just like what, Scott? We lost you for a minute.
It's just important with the bottles that you buy to make sure you're buying the right type of bottle for the application in which you're trying to accomplish. So the One and Only would be for cycling tanks and using it whenever the heck you want. That's not going to hurt nothing. Your sludge, the sludge ones, like I think Microbacter 7 even works that way. Micro Clean, I think I've heard of stuff like that. Those different synthetic blends, even Fritz, all those different types of bottle bacteria. They are what they are. Bacteria don't need food to live in bottles. They're just sitting there waiting for things to happen. So they work.
Activate, sure.
I use them.
And so in my case, when my tank, because one of the things I can add is that when I first started this tank, I added Dr. Tim's like I always do. The tank was already cycled. I just added it because I want more nitrifying bacteria. So I added it, and that's kind of what started that cloudy mess. But now, as you talked about, too many surfaces and sterilizing too much, I've got all the bacteria become heterotrophic and etc. If I added nitrifying bacteria, would it then compete with the heterotrophic? So it would have maybe helped.
It depends, because you can still pour one and only into your system, and if your system's not favoring oxygen, bacteria, the autotrophs in that bottle they're just going to switch gears. So that's the trick that everyone has to kind of just treat bacteria as like a one for all. They'll do whatever environment. They're like the life of the party. They will literally get along and be in any environment they need to do to survive, because they want to be fat, happy, and reproduce. That's all they want to do. They'll do
I've asked
any means
the question
necessary.
5 ways to Sunday. The bottom line is oxygen. I need more oxygen in my tank. That's it. That's the end of the story. Yeah. I keep trying to find a different way around it, but that's it. All right, I'm going to try to add.
It's hard to do. It's hard to do with your Seahorse tanks with the flow. I know.
One of the things that we try to prove constantly is Seahorses actually prefer higher flow. Think about them in the ocean. I mean, I know a lot of times they're in, I don't want to say lagoons, but in low flow areas.
Surface? Do you have more everything? Do you have all the pumps pointing at the surface?
In my tank, I have the returns. It's an all-in-one, so they're not really returns. The pumps.
Okay.
One, literally water falls into the tank.
Okay.
To try to create oxygen. The other one is pointed down because I was honestly lazy and trying to avoid adding a power head. But I think I'm going to have to add some sort of flow within the tank, because obviously this isn't working for oxygen. And charge chamber in the front of the tank, and that's it. So I think you're right. Yeah. I think I need to add more oxygen.
Yeah, if you get some more surface agitation, definitely creates more gas exchange, and it will pull in some more oxygen. It'll pull in more other things, but you're going to want moving water releases that oxygen ion, releasing it from hydrogen. So when it moves, it breaks. When water becomes stagnant, hydrogen locks up that oxygen ion. It makes it useful to nobody, which is what, with still water, it becomes, the other gases can become more deadlier.
And that's the other thing I want to do with this tank is the manufacturers would make power heads or return pumps or whatever with feed mode for smaller tanks, because I'm turning off stuff when I feed so that the food doesn't go everywhere. Yeah, you can broadcast feed, but in this tank, I don't want it to be more dirty. So I'm turning everything off to feed, and they're sitting there for 10, 20 minutes. And you got to figure the oxygen. There's the oxygen is being depleted. Sit there with no flow.
Yeah, that amount of time, you should be okay.
I mean, I know. I still want to find a fix.
Yeah.
All right,
yeah,
Holly and Carol, what questions do you have for
hours.
Okay, I'm going to back up for just a moment, because you were talking about how to do salt mix in RODI systems. First of all, unless you change your filters every time you turn on your RODI unit and let water sit in them and moisture sit in them, you're going to develop bacteria. So just making it, using it right, yeah, it's not necessarily a good idea. I, on the other hand, when I mix salt, I treat it with, I'm on a private well, and I had certain times a year get a lot of sediment in it. And I actually treat my water with bleach, which is normally what you would get in normal water out of the faucet anyway. And stir it around, aerate it, let it sit, and then put in a dechlorinator. And that's one thing, is just to be safe, because I have run into problems in the past. And I just thought I'd throw that out to you, some of you folks that are sitting there. Well, I'll just go make some RODI water. Oops, that RODI system's been sitting there for the last 3 days and hasn't had anything running through it. Well, you've got bacteria, I can guarantee it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, hands down, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, I'm very cautious.
Always,
I've been at this enough years and I've created enough problems for myself. Uh, Another thing is that you probably find interesting is unless I have green hair algae, which could sometimes pop up when I'm just now just setting up a tank, and I found that I can pull the green hair algae off of that after a few months. Let it get going, and quite frankly, I don't scrape the bottoms in the tank or the sides of the tanks or anything else. I don't have the problem with it. Part of it is probably because I have lower lighting. That may be one factor. But another factor is I don't necessarily clean my tanks every day or every week. It just depends on what I've got in there. If I've got 30 to 53 inch seahorses in a 58-gallon, I'm going to be cleaning a couple times a week at least. So a lot of it just
yeah,
comes down to being there for a long time and just knowing what you're looking at. And that, quite frankly, the only way it comes is
yep,
just it's experience. It comes down to what works for you. And the other thing is, mice or shrimp. You really can't keep live mice in with seahorses because anything that survives, like the seahorses, is going to get eaten by the adults. They're cannibalistic.
Sure. Yeah, we're
So
not
that's
talking about keeping them in with seahorses. We just want
yeah.
Scott to produce them so we can buy them. And to Zen Ginger for putting Scott's website. If you guys you want to start this type of ecosystem, not only does Scott sell the copepods, etc., but he is more than willing to help you with your personal tank, as he has with mine today. So definitely go to that website. Holly, I
yeah.
do want to ask one question.
Yeah.
What'd you say, Scott?
I said, yeah, I've helped many others. It's blown their minds. How much money they've saved on maintenance, equipment, food.
It's amazing. Holly, we're looking at your pretty tank behind you. You're letting it be the center show.
Sorry,
What
it's not too exciting right now. It's their bedtime, so lights are out. You can see them around the place. But yeah, so I went completely artificial after having problems. I started originally with live Fiji rock that I got from a pet store, from a guy brought it from his private aquarium, one of the employees. And at that time, this was a few years back, I think they had gotten to the point where you could not get live Fiji rock anymore. And he had some, and I bought it from him. But I
Holly,
had
Holly,
nothing
be
special.
Cheryl,
honest.
let her finish.
Wait
Let
a
her
minute.
finish.
Be honest. You just wanted that saloon in this tank that you put in there.
Yeah, so this isn't the one with the saloon. That's in the tiki tank in the other room.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this is my display tank where my oldest seahorses are.
So what
And
happened with the
was
Fiji
my
rock?
first. This was my first one. So with the Fiji rock, it started out. It went through its cycling, and this was before the seahorses came along. I didn't add the seahorses till I'd had the tank going maybe close to a year. I was slow cycling it. So it had gone through some bad algae stages, and then all of a sudden it didn't have algae like GHA or anything, and it had the coralline algae, and it was beautiful. But then I started having problems, I think, because of the high nutrients in the tank with the seahorses. I had a lot of GHA. I started to have bristle worms. And I think, like Scott was saying, one of the problems was because of the rock structure, debris was getting caught and stuck in the rock where I could not get it out. And I had some problems with bacterial infection in my first seahorses. And I learned a lot here from you guys about the causes of that being high organics.
Yep.
So eventually what happened was because I lead a busy life, I'm an insurance professional and have a lot going on, I didn't have time to deal with the issues arising from the live rock. It made it easier for me to ditch it entirely and go completely artificial. But I have a lot of biomedia in my sump. Like Zen Ginger was talking about the bio balls. I have a huge laundry bag of them in the sump, plus a homemade K1 media reactor. I'll see if I can show you. I don't know, it's dark in here right now, but maybe so Zen Ginger could see. I don't know if can you guys
Yep.
see this up? Okay, so I have a huge bag of bio balls in there, and they just sit there, which isn't the best. Like we were saying, I have an air line in there, but it's not circulating them that much. But I do have a 2-liter bottle, if you can see it, I don't
Yes.
know, full of K1 media. And so all my biomedia is there. Plus, I have a char chamber in here,
Yep.
like we talked about. And I clean the tank once a week and change out a third of the water volume in the tank, not the tank and sump combined. It's a 55-gallon, and I do a 20-gallon water change weekly. Now, when I do that, of course, the pumps are off. And like Kelly was talking about, I do, because I don't like seeing a lot of algae. Basically, what I do is I clean the front where not much algae grows. Actually, I don't have much problem with it there. But it likes to grow because I had the live rock. I've got spots where coralline algae started growing that I can't get rid of other than by scraping it off, which is a lot of hard work. So in the places where I don't video or take pictures much, I do kind of let the algae grow in a little bit and then just harvest it.
Mm-hmm.
Like on top of the return nozzle up here, it grows GHA like crazy because it's right under the light. I don't worry about it too much. I grab it out by hand once a week, and then I scrub the areas of the tank now and then when it's starting to look bad. I scrape off any coralline algae I find on the front. It's an acrylic tank, so I do use a plastic razor scraper. And then I do the bottom. I have half bare bottom and half sand, so I actually use both. I found that the sand doesn't really get in the other part of the tank. When I do my tank cleaning, I can use a sponge and scrape it back if it does. I clean that sand every week, with the siphon hose sand cleaner. But I keep the sand in there because I have a goby and a few crabs and things that seem to like it. But my decorations take turns. When I start to see algae on them, I'll just pop them in the bleach bucket. And I have stuff that I trade in and out of the tank so that if they're missing something because it went to the bleach bucket for the day, I usually have some other decoration for them. And I do keep a internal filter to help suck out, the debris and stuff. I also siphon by hand every time they eat. Everything that I find on the floor that I can see, I suck it out with the siphon. And then I have the internal filter, or quick filter is what it's called. Ray introduced me to that. And that runs full time. I empty it twice a week, like he recommended. So that's how I do my tanks, all artificial now.
And I do have a question, Scott. Would you say still in an artificial tank that phyto and copepods would be beneficial?
Absolutely. In fact, everything she's installed is, has its reasoning and methods perfectly. I mean, she's accomplished everything that she needs to accomplish. So it would definitely help. It would not hurt her, that's for sure. It definitely would help.
Now, my concern though is my guess is I'd probably want them in the sump because I'm pulling the stuff that's in the tank because it is artificial. It doesn't stay in here. It's going in the bleach bucket all the time.
Yeah.
So it's almost like too sterile for them to live and have an environment. Is my feeling.
I would agree. We'd have to just. I mean, if you
Because I used to have copepods when I started out. Like I said, when I had the live rock, that was part of how I did it. Was I also had a mandarin dragonette,
yeah.
and I
That you know where those pods went then if you had a dragonette in there.
Yeah, I seeded the tank with copepods originally and let them multiply before I added the mandarin. And the way my local fish store said, he says, well, when you see the copepods all over the glass in your tank, or acrylic is mine, but just see them everywhere, he says, then that means they're reproducing and they're ready for you to add the mandarin. And then you should be good to go. And so I had the mandarin for years. I did all this after I lost the mandarin. But she learned to eat the frozen mysis with the seahorses. So she would come and eat with them out of their dishes and was eating that. But I had copepods and all that too for a while. But just my feeling on it now is since I'm all artificial and nothing's eating them, there's nothing to eat the copepods. These guys are too big. They won't eat copepods. They're a good 8 inches now. So I don't see much benefit to having them really, or being able to even maintain them in the environment that I have.
Because
Yeah,
in
they
that
clog
environment,
up your filter stock.
The tank, right?
I mean,
They'll clog up your filter stock.
I don't know.
They'll clog up my filters. I never had that happen with copepods, but I
They're too
guess
small.
if you've got too many though, because nothing's eating them,
Yeah.
would that happen?
They'll go right through most filter stocks, depending on the species.
I would think,
Yeah,
because
they
I
also don't
never,
live-
when I had copepods, I never ran into that.
Yeah, they also don't live very long. Their lifespan is not super long either. So if there's a lacking of food and organics for them to feed on, typically you won't see them reap as much. Your tank, I mean, phytoplankton there, they're going to grow.
I don't use phytoplankton at all because I don't have anything like the only things in this tank besides the seahorses. I have a few hermits, very few. I think there's 3 left now. One pretty big one that's lived here forever, and then 3 little ones. I have 1 peppermint shrimp and a watchman goby, which I actually have to feed because there's not enough leftovers for them. I mean, I have a cleanup crew, but since I started cleaning up so well, after I had the problems, back when, I'm really careful about siphoning out all the uneaten food. So the critters come and ask me for food. When the seahorses are eating, the goby, he doesn't eat breakfast, but he'll eat lunch and dinner. He's an afternoon guy, I guess. He sleeps in. But he comes out of his little cave, and what they spill, he goes after. But if they're not spilling enough, he'll be like, "Hey, Mom, put that turkey baster over here for me." And the shrimp is the same way. They'll come eat with the seahorses, but I don't let stuff sit around long enough because I found cleanup crews aren't 100% going to keep your seahorse tank clean.
I think
I've
the result we're coming
Totally
to
agree.
is that if you're really on
Totally
it
agree.
like Holly is, then you have a huge sump and you have a maintenance awesome, then you're good. But if you're like me and you're lazy and you have a smaller tank and an all-in-one and you keep the seahorses safe, possibly this ecosystem and more oxygen, bottom line, I'm going to test these things out. But what were you saying, Scott? Were you saying something?
No, I can't. Since you spend so much time, and you're part of the cleanup crew. Many people forget to realize that you're part of the crew. It's your tank, and unfortunately, you have to kind of understand you're taking on duty as being part of that crew, and you got to play your part. There are ways to make your job way easier. And that's kind of what the big hidden secret behind my ecosystem building is, trying to help you, the new person off the street that wants to set up a saltwater tank in their home. I can get you to set up a saltwater tank having no knowledge, but getting you to enough to at least concept of an ecosystem. And that's always been, is to try to get people.
I think you would have been a huge help, Scott, back when I was starting out with the live rock and putting together what I needed to run that ecosystem successfully. That would have helped out and changed things a lot, because what was happening was, even though I had a much bigger cleanup crew, like it's dwindled down and I haven't added to it. The tank's been going like 5 years now. So back then I had a much bigger cleanup crew, but even with that, they weren't getting to everything. Stuff was getting into crevices and things that I didn't know about or I didn't get to. And if I had more of these tiny critters, besides the copepods, sounds like maybe some amphipods, maybe some other kinds of things that would have helped out and kept things more balanced, it wouldn't have been as difficult for me as it was. I was getting like high phosphates from the rock stuff going on, and I think your method would have really helped me balance out that tank right then, and maybe things could have gone differently. But because, excuse me, I didn't know those things, to deal with it easier for me in the long
It just
run.
depends. I really feel like it depends on what you're able to do as the cleanup crew, as everyone has pointed out. And you can do things different ways. You can keep seahorses in a very natural tank.
Yeah.
You just got to make sure to follow Scott's method of keeping up the ecosystem, or you can have a sterile tank and do the extra work, or have a huge sump or whatnot. In my case, because I'm doing it all in one, I'm gonna play with the ecosystem and more oxygen and everything we've talked about tonight, and see how that goes. Real quick, let's see. Zen Ginger wanted to know, because we talked earlier about about water sitting. Can you sterilize the water and the salt? So, Scott, when you were talking about bleaching and etc., water that sat there, is it pre-made? If you have pre-made salt water, can you sterilize?
Yes. Your two options would be either to boil it
Water changes.
Well, hang on, Cheryl. I was asking Scott. Go ahead, Scott.
or to treat it with
Hang on, Cheryl. Let Scott answer, please.
I'm sorry.
Scott answer.
What's my
If
answer?
you're doing this all right, who's going? Is it me or?
Go ahead, Scott.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Me sterilizing the water. Sterilizing the water for what you're trying to do for your water change, not necessary. You haven't built up enough organics and enough life to really harm your system. But just know that it could play a role in your system that you have going on with your organics going on. It might not be for everybody else. Everyone's literally going to do this and have water sitting for 3 or 4 days and do water changes, and their tanks are fine. They're not going to have issues like this. To sterilize the water, I think is completely. I have to sterilize water because of what I do and what the critters that I do with phytoplankton. My water's got to be 100% perfect every time, or else I'm starting a process that could phyto or breed other things in my phyto that I do. So when it comes to your tank, don't worry about that.
And Zen Ginger, I do believe you're going to do a much larger tank. Again, when he's giving me this advice, we're talking about a 40-gallon all-in-one, no sump. So I'm going to try the methods, but I don't worry about it. And Cheryl, what were you going to say? I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say it depends on your water source. In my case, because I am on a private well, and when we get heavy rains, we get a lot of sludge in there, a lot of iron. I actually have a 1 micron filter that I have in front of my primary RODI unit, just so I'm not continually changing out filters every several times a week, because that's how much crap I collect in my water. But it is something that you need to think in terms of, where's your water coming from? I know Holly's checked hers out to verify that hers is good, and she's also on a well.
Well, Cheryl, no, that's a great point. You're making great points, but I was more asking about water that you've made. So salt water that you've already filtered through RODI, you've added the salt, mixed it, and then it sits. And I'm thinking about the bacteria to be growing in there. And as Scott said,
grow.
It doesn't matter for an average normal tank, but in my small tank, it might matter. So
I always let it sit and get to the same temperature as the tank before I do a water change also. I plan it out.
Do you let your mixed salt water sit there for like days?
I usually mix it and use it over a couple-day period. When I'll make up I don't make up huge batches. It depends on how many tanks I have going too.
Sure.
If I've got 6 nurseries going and 2 grow outs and stuff, I'm in trouble. But if I just got some adults and most of the kids are gone, I got it easy.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, and
yeah. Well, one thing I
wonder. Go ahead, Cheryl.
I brought up a picture. We were talking about copepods earlier. What you're seeing in my background is actually the Apocyclops panamensis that Chad Clayton worked so much with even before he went to read Mariculture, which is now Reef Nutrition. But I just wanted to point out, in this, the newborns on these are about 50 microns. They're great size for like engines, cuda, reedi, the species of seahorses that produce very tiny fry. Yeah. However,
the Apocyclops panamensis.
Yeah, and the thing is, the adults are about the size of newborn baby brine shrimps, so they still work as a food for slightly larger fry. Mm-hmm. The other aspect of them, if you look at the picture that I've got up there, you'll see that the females actually have egg sacs on either side of their bodies. They look like they have a head and then two little tails. Those are the females. The males don't have the egg sacs, obviously, but they are in a very good size. And quite frankly, I've cultured all kinds of pods, and these are by far the easiest pods I've ever worked with in large numbers.
Well, for anyone who's a normal person, because Cheryl's an amazing person, any normal people, I'm going to Scott because I'd rather buy than culture because it's too much work. And as Scott talked about, he keeps
All you
everything
need is
clean.
you can use frozen. You can use frozen foods. You don't even have to have fresh phyto. You don't even have to grow phyto. I mean, I did the, raising all kinds of phyto for years and went through that. You don't even have to have phyto.
I know, but Cheryl, I don't want to raise copepods, period. I don't want to raise any of it. I don't want to do the phyto, the copepods. I'm all about going to Scott and buying it. And I just wanted to show one more from Scott.
When I was
Well, that's-
raising Seahorse
that's
fry, I raised copepods, and it wasn't hard, honestly.
It's not.
They were
not.
easier
You know
than the
what?
brine.
You
They were
guys
easier
are
than the
nuts.
brine shrimp.
You guys are nuts.
I threw them
I
in
say-
buckets outside, and they did fine.
You don't even need a hatching cone. You don't even need
You
a
know what?
hatching
You know what?
cone.
Hey, but wait a minute. Here's the thing. We can all say that. Oh, it was so easy to do this.
But
Here's
only
the
in
reason
summer
why.
here.
Hang on. Here's the reason why I would rather go to someone like Scott is because in this live stream, he's talked to me and proven to me that he is ridiculously careful. He's worried about cross contamination. He's worried about every drop of water having something in it. So he has to make sure his water is directed from sterilization to phyto. And the copepods don't get mixed with the rotifers or whatever. Doing it in a bucket in the backyard could do it for sure, but I wouldn't have that assurance that it was done properly and well. And Cheryl, I know you're scientific. Holly, I know it worked for you, but who knows when those cross contamination issues or those amateur issues lead to a problem. I would
Well-
much rather buy from someone like Scott who has taken the time to make sure that each thing is sterile and what you buy is what you get and what is supposed to be.
Years ago, friends
Instead of my
sent
bucket.
me.
We just
sent me
talked
some
about wait. We just talked about how bacteria in sitting water grows. So you throw a bucket in the back with copepods. Yes, you got copepods, but what
Oh yeah,
you don't know,
that's some disgusting water. Let me tell you.
right?
Years ago, a friend of mine sent me some copepods for some fry that I was working with. Well, for a couple of days, I looked in the nursery tub and spotted a flatworm hanging onto the tail of one of my fry.
Uh-oh.
And I called her back and said, "By the way, did you know?" She goes, "I know. I'm so sorry. I just realized they were there."
Yeah.
That's
I managed
somebody using tank water right there.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, she sent them to me. She didn't charge me anything for them. She was just being nice.
Yeah.
So I couldn't really say much. But it was one of those things where when I saw that flatworm, I was devastated because I knew what was going to happen. Fortunately, I did also learn that 37%, what am I thinking of? Formalin. 37% formalin does kill flatworms, but will not kill the copepods.
Okay, so real quick, because we've kept Scott all night now. It's now 10 o'clock. I always say this is going to be an hour, and it's always 2.
He's already got to get up at 5 tomorrow morning.
7 here.
But I just wanted to ask Scott, is this the best way to reach you, to purchase and talk to you about the cycle of a tank, the biological filtration of a tank, how to make it work? Your website is beautiful. I love it. I'm trying to show it right now. But is this the best way to contact you? Right here.
Yeah, I have contact information. I got all kinds of social media ways of contacting me as well. So you can shoot me a message. I ask only that if you're going to want advice about your specific tank, please give me everything and anything about it. Try not to leave out. It will help me puzzle together what it is that you have that maybe from what I've learned and what I experienced to figure out what you need to do to change or steer in a different direction to grow the right things. I would also make sure that you have plenty of information about the food food that you feed, and I'm also going to want to know what kind of bacteria you use to start the aquarium, because you'd be amazed sometimes of how you begin the process. Always it starts like a little race, and each organism is going to start this race, and someone's going to be either really far out ahead, and guys you may be looking to grow are 4, 5, 6 laps behind. And
Yep.
good news is we can correct this, we can fix this once you learn which organism and how long they grow, how long and what they need. And once you figure that out, it's just a matter of learning how to build it piece by piece.
Well, and we didn't dive into that.
And that's
Sorry, we didn't dive into that too deeply because everything you said is correct. Someone contacting you needs to tell their tank, and we have this all the time where someone will come to us and say, my seahorse is sick, and we'll go through 2 episodes of helping them, and then we find out, oh my gosh, you added a clownfish to the tank? Or, you started with a piece of red raw shrimp. I mean, no, right. So you got to have all. Thank you for pointing that out, Scott. Totally accurate.
That one thing that they didn't tell you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well,
it's always that one thing they didn't tell you, and it leaves me. Yep. And one more thing I would like to add, I could. Not only do I just sell live food, I'm not trying to get you to react to the live food and to the copepods. Like, that's my whole reasoning behind showing you how to build an ecosystem, is to get you to save money on buying food from me. You can grow this in your system. There's a way to do it. I do it for myself. I only have to replenish so often. And for those who like to keep pod-loving fish like mandarins, I have people, basically, I'm relieving that stress of you playing the pod numbers game, because I'm showing you how to grow it. I don't know if there's any other companies out there that really promote that or really give one-on-one help like that. But I'm offering, that's how I do business with people, and anybody who works with me and buys from me. You give me any information, that tank's it's mine, and I treat it just like it's mine. So,
do you have any A. panamensis pods?
I really appreciate y'all having me on. Yes.
Showed his A. panamensis pods. He absolutely does have them. And guys, I'm going to personally work with Scott to try to fix up my system so we can show you results. And Scott, we appreciate you coming. And I'm sorry we should have done a test run to see how the computer worked. I apologize, but you've still shared so much good information, and I would advise everyone to go to his site, contact him on the side, ask him questions where he can help you with your individual tank, as he's going to help me with mine. So, yay me.
Where are you located?
What, Cheryl?
Where is he located?
Where are you located, Scott?
Where are you located?
I'm in Florida.
The heart of saltwater thing.
Yeah.
We love that. And Holly, thanks for sharing your
hour away.
Nice.
You need to get some seahorses from ORA and start selling seahorses.
He's that tank behind him is going to hopefully be for seahorses. Yeah. Once you get them breeding, though, Scott, you're going to need more tanks. Just telling you.
Yeah, I forgot to send you my video.
Where I am.
You forgot to send what?
I'm too far.
I had these ones.
Sorry, we're all on a delay, guys. I'm sorry we're all on a delay, but we'll do better. And next time we have Scott on, no delay. And I would just say that's what we need. I've been begging for forever, is a home hobbyist that has the efforts and means to produce live foods. We need mysids and amphipods, and then eventually
mysids are tough to work with.
Scott here where I live.
Please. But amphipods, mysids, and then eventually, as Scott gets into seahorses, captive bred seahorses. That's what we need is more individuals that are willing to become our answer, our hope. Okay, Holly, what did you say? I'm sorry.
I was just saying I need a Scott here where I live. I'm so far
I'll tell
away
you.
from saltwater hobbyists that it's really hard.
I'll tell you, I figured out how to raise my shrimp, but what I literally used to do is when the gravid females were just about ready to explode, I'd move them into a separate tank, let them deliver, and move the adults back in with the other big ones. And I was actually able to really keep some good populations going doing that. But it is labor intensive.
Well, see, Scott, get with Cheryl on the side so you can get all her tricks for mysids because we need them. But do you ship?
Absolutely. I ship all over the United States, just the 48 states for right now. I've had people reach out to me internationally, but they never follow up. Same goes for one person in Hawaii, never followed up. But I have the ability to get it there if you follow up. So,
You just got to dish.
I got you guys unlocked.
All right, so there you go, guys. No matter where you are, in Holly, work with.
You just got to deal with U.S. Fish and Wildlife.
Well, we're not going to dive into that right now, but thank you again, Scott. I'm sorry, guys. I do have to work tomorrow, so I'm going to end it. But I will have Scott back on at his leisure when he can come back and answer any questions we didn't get answered tonight. And we'll give you an update on how my tank does as I work with Scott on fixing the ecosystem in a smaller tank. But for tonight, Scott, thank you so much for coming.
Yes, thank you. That was very informative.
No,
I'm sorry we talked over each other. Scott, you speak. We'll all shut up. Go ahead.
I really do appreciate y'all having me on. It was definitely a pleasure speaking with y'all and giving me a platform to talk to y'all and talk about your tanks. I also look forward to talking to y'all again. So definitely save your questions if you got them.
Absolutely. And again, next time we'll make sure there's not a delay. So we're talked by all us women, like Ray always does. And if you have any questions about copepods, bacteria, the cycle of a tank, send them to me so I can ask Scott next time. And for that, I am going to have to say goodnight, guys. But thank you all for coming. Everybody.